Jai Hind, welcome back. Today we are going a journey through the philosophical heart of early Indian thought, a journey that grapples with one of humanity's most enduring paradoxes. How can we honor non-violence when injustice threatens our communities? The title of our presentation today of this class and the topic of this class today is Ahimsa and Just War. Might seem contradictory at first glance. Can these two ideas truly coexist? Are not they fundamentally opposed? This is precisely the question that troubled the greatest minds of ancient India, and their answers offer us remarkable wisdom that remain startlingly relevant today. I invite you to approach this not as a historic lesson, but as a philosophical conversation, one in which the principle of ahimsa, non-violence, serves as our moral compass. Throughout, we will see how this sacred principle does not remain rigid in the face of ethical complexity, but rather deepens and matures through engagement with real world dilemmas. Now the question arises, what is ahimsa? Let me begin with the soul of our entire exploration. Ahimsa. Imagine for a moment the Sanskrit word ahimsa. It literally means non-injury or non-violence. But this is no mere absence of physical harms. Ahimsa is far more profound than beautiful than that. Far more profound and beautiful than that. In the ancient Indian worldview, ahimsa is a positive, active principle of compassion. It recognizes that every living being, from the smallest insect to the mightiest creature, possess consciousness, and the capacity to suffer. When you injure another being, you are not merely committing an external act, you are fundamentally damaging your own soul, your own karma. Think about this depth. Ahimsa extend to thought, word and deed. It is not enough to refrain from physical violence. We must cultivate peaceful thoughts, speak with kindness, and act with gentleness. Ahimsa is a way of being in the world. The principle became foundational to three great traditions. In Jainism, it reached its most absolute form. Monks took vows to cause no harms whatsoever. That's why here Panch Pratikraman Sutra, concept like Panch Pratikraman Sutra enters, which I would like you to explore by your own and understand that what Jainism is all about and the aftermath of Diksha, what happens there, and how these monks follow the whole tradition of Jainism. In Hinduism, it became woven into the ethical fabric of Dharma. In Buddhism, it reflects the compassion central to the path toward the enlightenment. The beauty of Ahimsa is that it aspires to our highest nature. It says you have the capacity to boundless compassion. Cultivate it. Let's move forward and understand the historical development of Ahimsa. Now let's trace how this profound principle evolved and deepened through India's sacred literature. This journey is crucial because it shows us that even ahimsa was not always expressed in the same way. In the Rig Veda, one of humanity's oldest texts, we see the earliest string of this consciousness, not yet explicitly named ahimsa, but present to reference to restraint and gentle conduct. The sages were beginning to ask, how should we live with gentleness? By the Yajurveda, 1500 to 1200 before Christ, something remarkable happens. The text explicitly extend more moral concerns to animals. There is a recognition that non-violence should govern our relationship with all creature, not just humans. This is the birth of ahimsa as the deliberate named principle. In the Chandogya Upanishad, that is from 800 to 600 BC, the philosophy become even more sophisticated. Ahimsa is presented as the path to escape the endless cycle of rebirths, samsara. Non-violence is not merely a rule to follow, it is a key to liberation itself. When you practice ahimsa, you align yourself with cosmic truth. And in the Yogic Sutras, we see ahimsa elevated to the supreme ethical principle. This very first of the yamas, the five universal restraint that from the foundation of righteous living, this is ahimsa's highest status. The the cornerstone of human virtue. This is the cornerstone of human virtue. Notice the trajectory from implicit restraint to explicit moral principle to a spiritual pathway and to supreme ethical foundation. Ahimsa does not weaken through history, it deepens. Let's discuss the Bhagavad Gita central dilemmas, which where ahimsa was in crisis. If you see whole Bhagavad Gita and the Mahabharata. Now we arrive at the moment of profound tension, and this is where our story becomes truly compelling. Imagine the scene on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Prince Arjun stands with his bow drawn. Arrayed before him are his kinfolk, his teachers, his elders. The war is about to begin, and Arjun is paralyzed by an ethical crisis. He cries out to his charioteer, Lord Krishna, how can I kill these people? To take life violates ahimsa, the supreme principle. I have learned I cannot be the instrument of such violence. Arjun is, in essence, saying, ahimsa forbids this. I will not fight. This is the moment when ahimsa confronts harsh reality. The war itself is justified. It is being fought against tyranny and injustice, against the Kauravas who have usurped the throne and brought suffering to the righteous. And yet, fighting means killing, it means violence. How can ahimsa and righteous war coexist? This is not an abstract puzzle. This is Arjun's anguish, and it echoes through millennia. Even warriors who has faced an unjust enemy, every protector who has had to make terrible choice feels his tension. And this is where the Bhagavad Gita offers us one of the philosophy's most mature insight. Krishna does not dismiss ahimsa. He does not say, forget non-violence, just fight. Instead, he guides Arjun toward the concept of dharma yudh, righteous war. You may be thinking that why this righteous war, dharma and uh, ahimsa is coming again and again in every concept, but you should also understand that all these arguments are coming and is the basic elements of these foremost traditional thoughts and epics. That's why we are trying to understand these theories, these theoretical argument or this principle based argument from different perspective. Let me move further. Then he explains that the war is not for personal vengeance or greed. Krishna is explaining that the war is not for personal vengeance or greed, but for restoration of dharma, that is righteousness. Fighting against the dharma, unrighteousness, is itself a form of duty, a sacred obligation. Non-violence remains the ideal, but when dharma is threatened, righteous actions becomes necessary. This is this key is intention. Fight not out of hatred, but out of duty. Fight not out of hatred, but out of duty to justice. Krishna is telling Arjuna, your commitment to ahimsa is beautiful and noble, but ahimsa exists within a larger ethical framework called dharma. When dharma crumbles, protecting dharma becomes your highest duty, and this may require you to fight, and that is not ahimsa, but that is fighting for the dharma. Moving forward, you must be thinking that what is dharma yudh? We have already discussed just what. Let me now articulate the framework that emerges from this profound dialogue, dharma yudh or righteous war. This is not a cynical loopholes that permits violence whenever convenient. Rather, it is a tightly constrained ethical framework that honors ahimsa, even as it acknowledges warfare's tragic necessity. The first principle of it, war as last resort. The text don't say go to war when you feel wronged. This outlines a hierarchy of approaches. We have already discussed Sam, Dan, Bhed and Dand. The first, try to pursue it through dialogue, that is Sam. If dialogue fails, offer material incentive for peace, that is Dan. Create divisions among the opposing forces, when Dan also failed, that is called Bhed. And only when all three successful means are exhausted, go to dand, use the force. Notice the progression, the framework. Keep ahimsa as the preferred path while acknowledging that sometimes, after exhausting all alternatives, force become unavoidable. This is the voice of hard-won wisdom, not rash justification. The second principle, just cause. War is justified only against adharma, unrighteousness, oppression, tyranny. Oppression, tyranny. You cannot fight for the personal glory, wealth, or revenge. You fight to restore cosmic and social order. The Kurukshetra war was justified because the Kauravas had violated dharma. But if Arjun had wanted to fight out of ego or greed, that would not be dharma yudh. Third principle, you should have a right intention. Even if the cause of the just war, your heart must be pure. Your fight for restoration of dharma, not for personal vengeance. This is a subtle but crucial distinction. It means that even in battle, you must cultivate the compassion of ahimsa. This is important. In the battle, you should try to cultivate the compassion of ahimsa. You harbor not hatred toward your opponent. You fight the unrighteousness, not for person. The fourth principle, moral restraints. And here is something remarkable. Even in justified war, warriors are bound by ethical codes of conduct. The ancient text speaks of yudhniti, the laws of war. You do not strike an unarmed opponent. You do not kill someone fleeing. You do not attack from behind. You do not target the innocent. In other words, even in necessary violence, ahimsa spirit persists. You cause the minimum harm necessary and you protect the vulnerable. These principles shows us that ahimsa is not abandoning its post. Rather, it is constraining and directing the necessity of force toward justice and protection. The four strategies, that is ahimsa, which is ahimsa's preferred path. Let me dwell a moment on the four strategies I mentioned earlier: Sam, Dan, Ved, and Dand, because they reveal the profound preference for non-violence embedded in the classical Indian framework. Krishna outlines these in the Mahabharata as the hierarchy. This is crucial. The tradition does not skip lightly to military force. It insists on exhausting peaceful avenues first. Think about what this communicates. If you truly honor ahimsa, you will not rush to violence. You will first try conciliation, sit down and talk, appeal to shared values, seek understanding. If that fails, offer incentives. Perhaps material offering can resolve the dispute, generosity can soften hurts. If that also fails, try to divide the opponent. If the opposing force is united by deception, expose the truth, create internal dialogue. Next is restore to force. Only when all else has genuinely failed, nothing that even the fourth step done is described not as destruction but as a punishment, a corrective measure meant to restore order, not annihilate the opponent. This framework is ahimsa speaking through a reluctant acceptance of necessity. It says we prefer peace. We will pursue every peaceful path. We will remain faithful to non-violence as our primary commitment. But we acknowledge that sometimes when all peaceful means fail, force become a tragic necessity. This is maturity, this is wisdom. Moving forward, we're trying to understand, now we will try to understand ahimsa in diversity, and that too from the Buddhist perspective. Let's expand our lens to see how Buddhism, another tradition rooted in ahimsa, grappled with the same question. In early Buddhist texts, there is a fascinating distinction. Monastic and lay responsibilities differ. This is important to understand. For monks and nuns, the commitment to ahimsa is absolute. They take vows to cause no harm whatsoever. The role is to pursue enlightenment through the path of perfect non-violence. When they come across When they come across an insect, they carefully brush it away rather than harm it. But for lay rulers and kings and administrators, this is recognition that they have different responsibilities. They must protect their kingdom and ensure justice. The Buddha himself, according to the Kosala Samyutta, approved of King Pasenadi's righteous defense against aggression. The Buddha did not condemn the king for waging a necessary war to protect his people. What does this tell us? It reveals that even traditions committed to ahimsa understand that first, different roles carry different ethical responsibilities. Second, a king who fails to defend his people against invasion is neglecting a sacred duty. Third, defensive warfare, fighting to protect innocent and the community, is not seen as a violation of the ahimsa spirit. Fourth, the intention matter. Are you defending or are you attacking for conquest? Buddhism preserves ahimsa as the supreme ideal, while acknowledging that in a world where harm exists, protecting other from that harm becomes itself an expression of compassion. Let's try to understand ahimsa through Jain evolution of on violence. That is, when ahimsa matured through nuances. Let me help you to turn toward the Jainism and understand this ahimsa. The term ahimsa, the tradition that made ahimsa most absolute. If any tradition held to non-violence without compromise, it was this one. And yet even here we find evolution and nuance. Medieval Jain scholars, particularly from the 12th century onwards, engaged with the question that had troubled thinking within their tradition. Does absolute non-violence ever demand a terrible price? They introduced a concept called Virodhihimsa, violence to prevent greater violence. Listen to the reasoning. If you can prevent a greater harm through a lesser harm, are you not in some sense honoring the spirit of ahimsa? It is murder. If a murder is about to kill innocent people and the only way to stop him is through force, is not stopping him an expression of compassion toward the intended victim. This is not a loophole. It is Jain philosophy taking ahimsa seriously to all its complexity. The scholar recognized that first, absolute non-violence applied in certain situations can lead to greater suffering. Second, defensive action against oppression can be ethically justified. Third, ahimsa means non-injury to the innocent, and sometimes protecting innocent require action against wrongdoing. Next is ahimsa is not mere passivity. It is active protection of life and dharma. Notice the direction. Jainism does not abandon ahimsa. Rather, it deepens ahimsa by applying it with wisdom to real world context. The principle remain the principle remains, the application becomes more nuanced. The evolution is crucial to understand. Even the most rigorous tradition dedicated to non-violence acknowledge that ahimsa must be applied contextually, thoughtfully, and always with the goal of protecting life. Now let's understand the 6 key principles. Let me draw together the insight from all this tradition into a coherent framework. The synthesis shows us how ahimsa and just war are not contradictory but complementary. Two faces of a single commitment to truth and righteousness. First principle, that is, I'm going to call it principle 1. Ahimsa is supreme aspiration. First and foremost, non-violence remain our highest ideal. It is the direction toward which we should always be moving. Whenever we fail to honor ahimsa, we feel the way of the failure morally and spiritually. The principle itself is never compromised. It is always the star we navigate by. The second principle, contextual application. Ahimsa must be applied with wisdom to particular context. Ahimsa must be applied with wisdom to particular context. A mother protecting her child from a cobra acts from ahimsa. Her compassion extends to the child's safety and even to redirecting the snake's danger. A ruler protecting subject from invasion acts from ahimsa. Her duty to defend the innocent flows from the same compassionate principle. Ahimsa is not the absence of action; it is right action, proportionate action, compassionate action. The third principle: exhaustion of alternatives. Before restoring to force, all peaceful means must be exhausted. This is not a technicality, it is the expression of our deepest commitment to the ahimsa. We try dialogue, we offer reconciliation, we appeal to conscience. Only when all this fails, truly fails, does the question of force even arise. This principle keeps ahimsa at the center of decision making. It prevents us from rationalization. It forces us to genuinely exhaust peaceful options. The fourth principle: protection over destruction. War is justified for defense and restoration. War is War here is justified for defense and restorations, never for conquest or domination. There is a world of difference between fighting to protect your people and fighting to expand your territory. The first honor ahimsa through protection, the second violates ahimsa through greed. When you wage war, the question you must ask is, am I protecting what is precious or am I seizing what is not mine? Only the former can be dharmyad. The fifth principle: moral restraints even in conflict. Warriors are bound by ethical codes even in justified conflict. This is perhaps the most striking principle. It says, even when you must fight, you fight with restraints. You do not use more force than necessary. You do not target the innocent. You do not torture. You do not discreet. In other words, your commitment to ahimsa persists even in war. You are not freed from ethical constraints. Rather, your ethical framework guides even the terrible necessity of combat. This is the voice of civilization itself. It says that even in the darkness of the conflict, we can remain bound by the light. The sixth principle: restoration of dharma. The ultimate goal of righteous war is the restoration of dharma, of righteousness, justice, and cosmic order. It is not retribution, it is not punishment for its own sake, it is restoration. When the war is over, the intention is that dharma is restored, that the innocent are protected, and that the truth and righteousness prevails. The warrior's sword is a tool for restoring balance and not for perpetuating conflicts. Let's move forward. Here we are going to understand that what is ahimsa speaks across cultures. Here is something that will genuinely startle many of you. The framework we have been exploring, this principle of ahimsa and dharma prefigure by centuries the just war theory developed by Western philosophers like Augustine and Thomas Aquinas. In the 3rd and 4th centuries, as Christianity was grappling with statecraft and military necessity, Western thinkers developed a framework they called jus ad bellum and jus in bellum and jus post bellum. Justice in going to war, uh, jus post bellum, justice in going to war, justice in conducting war, and justice after war. So just at bellum asks, do we have the right to go to war? And the answer is yes, only if there is just cause, legitimate authority, and right intention. Compare this to dharma yudh, the requirement that the cause of the restoration of dharma, not personal vengeance. Just in bellow, ask how should we conduct ourselves in war? And the answer is with proportionality, distinctions, protecting non-combatants basically, and military necessity. Compare this with the classical Indian framework of Yuddha Niti, the ethical codes governing warriors. What is remarkable is that two entirely different civilizations, thinking independently, arrived at similar conclusion. Even when war is necessary, it must be constrained even by ethics. Even I'm not going into debate on this discussion that uh, the on the comparison of two civilization. I'm just saying that there is a complementary thoughts in these two tradition who are talking on the same point. Even when even both the text, both the civilization and both the text are talking about the same thing. Even when force is used, compassion must guide it. This is not a coincidence. It reflects a deep truth about justice itself. When we think carefully about the righteousness demand, deferred tradition converge, but here is the crucial difference. Early Indian text explicitly rooted the framework in ahimsa, nonviolence as the foundational principle. The West tended to develop just war theory as a concession to necessity. India developed it as an expression of a deeper commitment of ahimsa applied wisely. Then the Indian approach is more profound. It does not say war is justifiable despite our commitment to non-violence. It says war becomes permissible only in rare circumstances as a constant expression of our commitment to protecting life and dharma. There is some living applications of ahimsa in our world. Let me try to bring this philosophy into our present moment. These are not ancient ideas gathering dust, they are profoundly alive and relevant. Gandhi's Satyagraha, Truth Force, is, uh, Gandhi's perhaps the 20th century's greatest student of ahimsa, refined the principle for modern age through Satyagraha. Truth Force, he showed the ahimsa is not a passive resignation. It is active, powerful, and transformative resistance to injustice. When Gandhi and his followers faced colonial oppression, they did not take up weapons, instead, they weaponized truth, dignity, and non-violent resistance through boycotts, marches, civil disobedience, and moral witness. They brought an empire to its knee. This is ahimsa. This is ahimsa's powerful action. Gandhi showed that ahimsa does not mean allowing injustice to triumph. It means confronting injustice with true and love instead of hatred and violence. Contemporary debates on self-defense is also there's also multiple examples of this thing. But today we around the world societies grapple with question of legitimate self-defense. When can a nation defend itself? When is force proportionate? When does defense become aggression? These classical Indian principles offer a compass for these debates. They ask us, have we exhausted peaceful resolution? Is our cause truly about protecting the innocent, or is there greed and domination hidden beneath? Are we using the minimum force necessary, or are we using conflict as an excuse of maximizing power? After the conflict, will dharma be restored, or will we have simply created new wounds? Or consider humanitarian intervention. When the international community considers military action to stop genocide or mass atrocities, the principle of ahimsa and dharma yuddha offers profound guidance. When the innocents are being slaughtered, does not dharma demand the other intervene? But if intervening must and not to do so with restraint, this genuine concern for protecting the vulnerable and with the clear exit strategies that restore rather than perpetually dominate. These are the living questions that classical Indian philosophy illuminates. Let me conclude by returning to where we began, to the apparent paradox that troubled Prince Arjun and that troubles us still. Every Indian text reveals a sophisticated ethical framework where ahimsa and just war are not contradictory but complementary. They teaches us that ahimsa is not mere passivity, passivity. It is an active, powerful principle that guides us toward protection, restoration, and justice. Non-violence is the aspiration. Righteous defense is the difficult duty. We do not abandon ahimsa. When we defend the innocent, we express ahimsa through that defense. The framework is deeply constrained. War is justified even in rare circumstances, only after exhausting all peaceful means, only for just cause, and only when conducted with the moral restraints. Even in necessary violence, we remain bound by ethics. We do not become beasts in battle. We remain humans, guided by dharma, proportionality, and concern for the innocent. This is wisdom that emerged not from comfortable times, but from a civilization that knew war deeply, that knew the seduction of violence, that the rationalization of cruelty, the tendency of justify anything in the name of victory. And from that hard knowledge, they gave us this insight. True honor lies not in winning at any cost, but in fighting justly when fighting is necessary, and returning to peace and dharma when the struggle is over. Ahimsa then is not the opposite of just war. Ahimsa is not the opposite of just war. It is the principle that makes just war possible and rare and constrained and ultimately aimed to aimed at the restoration of peace and righteousness.